Welcome back to Without Shortcuts. Today we are making green bean casserole.
Now I think for everybody's Thanksgiving dinner, they look around, they're like, we need something green on the table, we need another vegetable, blah, 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 blah. They look in the cabinet, they've got a can of green beans, they've got a can of cream of mushroom soup, and because why wouldn't you keep them on hand? You have a can of those crispy little onion topping things because they're delicious just to eat out of the can. You throw those all together, you put it in the oven for a couple of minutes, voila, you've got green bean casserole. I think we can do a little better than that.
Let's hope so. So typically, as he said, when people are making green bean casserole, it's usually with canned, maybe frozen green beans. We're going to use fresh green beans today and see how that helps elevate the dish. We're also going to make our sauce from scratch, and then just because we can, we're going to add some bacon into it.
From a cost perspective, which we've always been conscious about on our channel, it's worth noting that this entire big colander full of fresh green beans that were picked 2 days ago cost about $2, $2.50. So using these cheaply, totally viable, totally accessible, and we are going to look at what the time difference is in putting this all together. But we'll see if it matches up, and in the end, we'll know, is it worth it to do this all from scratch?
Absolutely. Now we've got a few things to get through before we actually start putting everything together. So we're going to go ahead and start prepping. We're going to chop up some bacon. We've got to slice some onions, and then chop mushrooms for our sauce, and then last we'll get the green beans prepped. And then once all the prep work is out of the way, then we'll start actually cooking, putting some things together, and we will see what we come up with.
Now, something to consider as we're putting this recipe together, and to be honest, we are kind of winging this, so stay with us, but we're not really going to add any salt directly to the dish at the end because we've got a lot of salt going on with the bacon. We're going to put salt on top of our onions as they sit right here because that's going to dry out some of the moisture and make them easier when we actually put them in to fry them. And then we're also going to have salt in the water that we blanched the green beans in. So don't be alarmed if we're not adding as much salt as you think we should because it's coming in stages so we can layer it together.
Right. We've got the bacon and onions prepped, and then we're going to go ahead and we'll just double team these mushrooms here, get those out of the way. And then we'll start doing green beans.
We did wash our knives and surfaces, and everything is ready to go here nice and clean and sanitarily. So we just did a kind of a rough chop. We don't want the mushroom pieces to be too fine because they're going to cook down, but we don't want them to be the star of the dish. This is a green bean casserole, not a mushroom casserole, which sounds delicious, but different video. So we have those already. We have our other ingredients that are already prepared. We're going to go ahead and cut back just so we can see exactly how long it takes to do the green beans themselves. So we can compare it because opening that can of green beans is obviously going to be super fast, but let's see how long it takes. We're going to prep, I think this is around 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds. You probably don't need that many, but like I said, we're kind of winging this, so we'll see how it comes out and we'll see how much time this takes.
All right, let's see what happens. So like Doug said, we're going to go ahead and prep the green beans and see how long this takes to see if it's really worth doing this totally from scratch. So first things first, we're going to go ahead and get these washed off. Next thing we've got to do is we're going to go ahead and just start chopping green beans. I'll be curious to see what the time is wherever that ends up here on the screen. But that is it for prep work, so let's get cooking. First things first, we're gonna go ahead and render some bacon. We've got a video on that probably somewhere up there if you want to see kind of our method for doing that. But basically, Start with a cold skillet. We're just gonna dump the bacon in, put it on kind of a nice medium to medium low heat, and then we're just gonna let it sit.
And that next step is getting our onions ready. So to do our onions, the first thing we're gonna do is get some eggs in a bowl, and then we're gonna put some panko in another bowl. We'll dip our onions in the eggs and then into the panko. Using the pre-made Panko Breadcrumbs is not a shortcut, by the way, because these are electrolyzed and coated to stay crispy, and it's a whole thing that we don't have the equipment to do here. So, not a shortcut, just to preface that.
So we're gonna put all of our eggs in one bowl?
Yeah, we are. Good dad joke, though.
Appreciate that. There you are, sir.
Perfect. Again, our onions have been salted and sitting, so they pulled out some moisture. We're just going to dump those into our eggs. Make sure everything gets nice and coated here. And then let them drain just a bit and right into the breadcrumbs.
Now you could also do this with seasoned flour rather than breadcrumbs, but we're thinking the breadcrumbs are going to give us kind of a nice little extra crunch on the outside of those onions.
Because really, you're trying to replicate those nice crispy ones that come in the can that, again, are hydrolyzed or electrolyzed or whatever the word is. And they're delicious, but you want to get as close to those as you can. Once again, like the green beans, we'll see if this is worth it.
Right.
And then just mix those up, get a good coating, as even and consistent as you can. That's something there. So from here, we'll go back over to the stovetop, we'll fry these up a little bit, and we'll see what's next. Once the onions are ready and coated, we've got our bacon grease on the stove. It's heated back up. You don't really have to be super careful about what your temperature's at, but you want to make sure that it's hot enough that these are going to actually fry. So I checked this with an instant read. We're at about 325, 335, right in there. But as long as it's hot, you can feel the heat on it, maybe a tiny bit of smoke coming off. You should be just about right. Now, we're also going to add just a little bit of butter into the mix. That's just going to soften it up, give us a little bit of that butter texture, that butter taste. And once we have that melted up, okay, we're ready to go. I also have a plate with some paper towels on it that I'm going to use to actually drain these once they're done frying too. Have that ready in advance. That'll be a benefit. Alright, once our oil is ready, our butter is melted down. Get another little mix on these. And into the oil. We're getting close. Once you start getting that nice brown color on it, get the nice bubbles, you can see these are starting to crisp up. We're almost there. So I can feel these on the bottom. You can see they're nice and crispy. I can feel it just with the spoon that they're getting a nice texture, and I don't want the breadcrumbs to burn. So I'm going to turn off my heat, take these, let the oil drain to one side and push the onions to the other. And just kind of slowly start scooping them onto the paper towel. And then I'm going to spread these out on the paper towel to let them drain. I'm not going to wrap them up because I don't want them to steam and get soft. I want there to be as much crispy texture as I can have, and they're going to get heated up again, so we'll be good to go. But those are ready. We'll come back, we'll throw our sauce together, and we're almost there. With the onions done, we're getting close. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to throw together our sauce. This is the part that if you were doing everything out of cans, this would be the cream of mushroom soup. So while we're not going to make a soup, we're going to make a nice creamy mushroom sauce that is going to bring this whole thing together. So to start, I've got my large cast iron skillet, which we're going to throw everything together in this skillet with the green beans, bake it in this skillet, because we've used plenty of dishes already. So we're going to try and minimize that by just using this one more. So I'm going to start with some of my bacon grease. Now I've used this for a lot of stuff. It's got some of the breading in it, yada yada yada. So just to make sure I get just the bacon grease, I'm going to go ahead and strain that out. If you don't want to use it, if you have too many burned pieces in there, whatever the case, you don't need this. It's just an extra little flavor component. Once I've got my bacon grease, I'm going to throw in about, half a stick of butter, about a quarter cup, somewhere in there. And I'm going to get these all melted together until the butter stops bubbling like that. There we go, the butter stops bubbling. Go to our mushrooms that we cut earlier. We did wash our mushrooms because we bought them commercially, and anything that grows the way that mushrooms do, we're going to wash before we cook them. So they're cooked, they are washed. Add those to our butter. Get them stirred up, get them coated in the butter. Especially when you wash mushrooms, they're going to have a lot of moisture and water in them. So you do want to cook these for a little bit and get some of that water out of them and released. So once you can kind of drag your spoon through and you get that nice little trail, that probably means you have cooked these enough. So the next thing, and if your family isn't huge into mushrooms, you probably don't need to use this many. We all like them, so we're going to go heavy on them. But just like that, with garlic, if you really like the garlic, go heavy. If you don't, use a little less. We're going to use about 4, not huge cloves, but decent size. We're going to get a significant garlic flavor in. But make sure you wait until your mushrooms are almost completely cooked before you start adding garlic, because your garlic will cook very fast and you don't want it to burn because it will get bitter very quickly. So once the garlic is in there, get it stirred in. Should just take a couple of seconds and you'll be able to smell all that wonderful garlic into the kitchen. Just a couple of seconds after that, you're going to take just a little bit of flour and you're going to sprinkle it over the top of this. You don't need very much. You're not going for a super thick sauce here, but you do want it to thicken up and hold on to your beans. And then again, stir that in. Let the flour suck up that extra fat at the bottom of the pan. Perfect. You're going to give this about a minute until you as you're smelling it, you can't smell any of that raw flour smell. And if you can still smell kind of that dry, floury smell, then you need to just let it cook just a little bit longer. Just make sure it doesn't cook so long that it burns any of your mushrooms or your garlic. Once that smell is gone, you're going to take some chicken stock. If you're lucky enough to have some you've made yourself, even better. If you don't, what you buy at the store will work. But again, we don't really do the shortcuts. So, a little chicken stock. This is technically deglazing the bottom of the pan. And then just scrape up all the nice little flavor bits that are on the bottom. Get that back up to a nice little simmer. So while this is simmering and starting to reduce down, so that we're starting to get it into that nice thick consistency, we're also going to take water in a nice big pan. We're going to get that over some heat. We're going to let that start boiling so that we can blanch our green beans. And at the same time, we're going to turn our oven on. We're going to turn it up to about 325 and make sure it's preheated for when the rest of this is done. So the mushrooms are just about ready. As our water is heating up, I'm going to go ahead and salt the water. Again, we haven't added any salt directly to this dish, so this is how we're going to make sure it has that salt imparted into it. So we've got our water. We're going to add enough salt so, as they say, our water tastes like you imagine the ocean would. Never really had any ocean water, but I have a pretty good idea. You need a lot of salt, more than you think you need. So we'll stir that in. Let that come up to a boil. Come back over to our mushrooms. All right, once again, you can see as I drag my spoon through the mixture, leaves that nice trail. So it is getting very close. I'm gonna go ahead and add some heavy cream to it. You could use whole milk here, or whatever cream you have, but go all the way, use the heavy cream, get that texture in there. We're just gonna use, I don't know, maybe a third of a cup, maybe a little bit more than that. Right in that area. Oh, that's the good stuff. Okay, stir that. Heat just on medium. Let that come back up to a simmer. While that's coming up to a simmer, oh, last thing. We are going to add just a little bit of red wine vinegar to this. Barely even perceptible, but just having that acid included will really bring the flavor of this whole thing up. So we're just going to add maybe, I don't know, between a half a teaspoon and a teaspoon. You don't need very much, and it'll really open up all the other flavors in this. It even opens up the aromas. It's wonderful. We're going to let that all come together. We have our pot of water is just coming up to its nice full boil. So once we get our water up to a nice full boil, we're going to take our green beans that have been cut and cleaned and ready to go. We're going to throw these in to blanch them. They only need to blanch for like 20, maybe 30 seconds. All you're trying to do is break down some of that membrane, get some of that salt into them, just get them ready to go. So we're going to take those right into our water, just a couple of seconds. Normally, after we blanch these, we put them in an ice bath to make sure they didn't overcook. But because we're going to put these directly into the oven in just a couple of seconds, that won't be necessary. So that should be just about enough time. You can see the green beans start to get a nice lighter green color and become just a little more vibrant. Once you have that, you can use a spider, a slotted spoon, whatever you got that makes it easy to take these out. Whew, that's hot. Get as much of the water off as you can and just directly into your sauce. Perfect timing. Our oven comes up to temperature. Green beans into the sauce. Stir those. Actually, even before we stir those too much, we got to make sure. Add our bacon that we rendered down into there. Get everything as coated and as even as possible, and then even it out in your pan. And then finally, we're going to take our fried onions and just spread those all across the top. And from there, into the oven. And we'll just let that bake for about 15 to 20 minutes until it's nice and soft and piping hot, and then we'll take it out and see what we've made.
We've got our green bean casserole out of the oven, so we've let it cool for just a little bit, and we're going to go ahead and dish some up and give it a taste. See what we made here. Hopefully we made green bean casserole.
I have high hopes that that's what this is.
Give that a taste. So right off the bat, you can tell that those are fresh green beans, that those did not come out of a can. They've got just a little bit of extra sweetness to them and just a really good flavor.
The texture on them is also like crunchier because they're not pickled and stewed and canned, and
right.
you know, so that texture is great. The flavor, I agree, is good. I really like the onions and the panko crumbs on the top as far as flavor.
Yep. And
I think they could
nice crunch on them too.
Yeah, that part I think is really good. I think a little bit more sauce,
Definitely,
so that it came together. Which I think we had the right amount of mushrooms in it. Just some more chicken stock, some more of the heavy cream. Kind of bring that all together so that it was a little bit more cohesive and, you know, the way you remember it as
Yeah, I mean, a little more saucy. You know, we're making a casserole, we're not making a soup. So we don't need a ton more sauce, but it definitely does need more sauce. As far as the mushrooms go, using fresh mushrooms, you get a really good mushroom flavor out of that. But, you know, again, I agree, a little bit more cream, a little more chicken stock, just to kind of bring some more of that liquid back into it.
And I think that this would actually be better served in the casserole dish rather than in the pan.
Yeah.
You can kind of taste the pan, but just concentrating it down so that it was in a smaller dish and a little deeper, just to keep some more of that moisture in it, I think would be a better way to go.
Right.
So the question comes, is this worth it compared to doing it super easy, super quickly, out of the cans, put everything together and bam?
Right. For the amount of time that it took, the extra time to wash and cut the beans, to do all the prep work that we did beforehand, and then rendering out the bacon, actually constructing a sauce for it. If there's more sauce in it, I would say hands down, for sure, that is definitely worth doing from scratch.
I agree. I would say if this was done correctly, if you had the right measurements, if you had the right quantities, then it would absolutely be worth it. Like the flavor is wonderful.
It is, absolutely.
I think this is more of a primary dish than a side dish, which isn't a bad thing by any means. But for the purposes on a Thanksgiving table, definitely worth it. I would just want it done a little differently.
Yeah, I mean, if this is on your Thanksgiving table and this is a side dish for you, this is the side dish people are going to keep coming back for sure.
Definitely.
So, give this a try. Maybe kind of adjust the recipe just a little bit and some of the things that we just talked about.
Or if you have a recipe that you like, maybe you've already done this research and you know the answers. You know, what do we need to do to make this
for sure
exactly how we want it? How do we make this worth doing it from scratch?
Definitely. So let us know down in the comments kind of what your experiences are with it. Hit us up on Instagram and Twitter or whatever it's called now. Check out our TikTok. That's finally up and running. We've got some interesting videos up there. And definitely, as we've shown here today, keep skipping the shortcuts.
Absolutely. This one's worth it. We'll talk to you guys again soon. Thanks.